Here we are with another great video from Salem GADSDA. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button to keep track of all our new videos released. This study is called The Forgotten Angel. Well, today our agenda is going to be clear. We have 3 main points. But before that, let me just say that today is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. This is an original study given by Brother Don Adair on February 4th, 2012. This study is a transcript of that study. The study was transcribed by Sister Kerr. Today we will go over 1. The 3 angels and the 4th angel in chapter 14, Revelation chapter 14 and chapter 18. 2 important truths will be revealed. And 3, we'll find out how the Laodiceans only partially understand the 3 angels' messages. This is a very important study because it teaches 2 truths which the average Laodicean does not know about, much less understand. Though they partially understand somewhat about the 3 angels' messages, they do not understand at all the other 2 angels, much less know about them. Noted below are the 2 truths which they need to understand. But first, let me address this. Some have chosen to create a controversy over the title of this study, which was chosen by Brother Adair. Brother Adair identifies the forgotten angel as the angel of Revelation 14, 17, 19 in a previous article published on Davidian.org. But he makes no distinction in this transcript study as far as our records go. He talks primarily of the 3 angels' messages and the 4th angel in Revelation 18. The apparent conflict and lack of explanation in the study is explained in chart 5, which features the parabolic calls. The angel, which represents the 144,000 of Revelation 14-17, is standing right next to the 4th angel of Revelation 18, 1-3. This is because the forgotten angel proclaims the message of the loud cry angel. This is why Brother Adair classed them together. If the 144,000 represent the forgotten angel, then most certainly their message is forgotten as well by the church. The Rod says, close reasoners and logical thinkers are few. How many men in the age of the world fail to go deep enough? They only skim the surface. They will not think closely enough to see difficulties and grapple with them, and will not examine every important subject which comes before them with thoughtful, prayerful study, and with sufficient caution and interest to see the real point at issue. They talk of matters which they have not fully and carefully weighed. That's Testimonies for the Church, Volume 4, page 361, and also it's quoted in 3 Symbolic Code 5-6, page 7, paragraph 8. Let's get started. The Laodiceans have been teaching the message of the judgment of the dead ever since the year 1844, but they know nothing about the judgment of the living. This study about the forgotten angel reveals some details about the judgment. I am going to read a statement from The Great Controversy, page 490. Momentous are the interests involved therein. The judgment is now passing in the sanctuary above. For many years, we know since 1844, this work has been in progress. Soon, none know how soon, it will pass to the cases of the living. That's Great Controversy, page 490. So the judgment of the living is what needs to be understood, which we can understand from this study of the forgotten angel. The other truth they need to understand from this study is the great multitude. The judgment is now passing in the sanctuary above. For many years, we know since 1844, this work has been in progress. Soon, none know how soon it will pass to the cases of the living. That's in great controversy. So the judgment of the living is what needs to be understood, which we can understand from this study of the forgotten angel. The other truth they need to understand from this great study is the great multitude. The Laodiceans think that only 144,000 saints out of the entire world will be living at Christ's second advent. Now, they did believe that, but now they're kind of shifting and they just try to avoid the subject altogether. You know, people get angry in the Adventist church if you bring up the 144,000. You know, they get very uncomfortable because they never resolved this issue in the doctrine. This wrong idea has forced them to think that the great multitude are the resurrected dead at his second coming. The study about the forgotten angel reveals some details about the identity of the great multitude. And we can find in the scriptures a description of the great multitude, Revelation 7, verse 9. It says, "And after this I beheld," after the 144,000, right? The chapter begins with the 12 tribes. So after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man can number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. I will read here a statement in 2TG about this particular thing. The one I read before was the Great Controversy, page 490. In 2TG, number 44, page 36, paragraph 3, it says, "We have now positively seen that there are first and second fruits, one from the church, the 144,000 sons of Jacob, and one from all nations, the great multitude, which no man can number." Now, to understand about the forgotten angel, it is necessary to first study about the message of William Miller. William Miller's message of the 2300-day prophecy, or 2300 years, we find that William Miller's message was the doctrine of the 2300 days, which was teaching as noted in Daniel's prophecy. "And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." Daniel 8:14. And we understand as Adventists that cleansing took place, started in 1844. In another prophecy of Daniel, he was told by the angel Gabriel about the 3.5 years in Daniel 7:25, which is interpreted to mean a day for a year, thus 1260 years. The 2300 days is also interpreted to mean 2300 years, which ended in 1844. You can read about that in Great Controversy 410, paragraph 1. William Miller connected this 2300-day prophecy of the cleansing with the first angel's message. And here's what it says. "Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come." Revelation 14:7. Now, this quotation from the Great Controversy says, "In common with the rest of the Christian world, Adventists then held that the earth, or some portion of it, was the sanctuary." She's talking about before they became Seventh-day Adventists, right? These are the early Adventists. They understood that the cleansing of the sanctuary was the purification of the earth by the fires of the last great day, and that this would take place at the second advent. Hence, the conclusion that Christ would return to the earth in 1844. So their mistake was based on a common theological belief at that time that the earth was God's sanctuary. And that's why they had that big disappointment. The writings of William Miller and his associates were carried to distant lands, but most of the Christian world, especially in America, rejected his message. The Harmon family, of which their daughter Ellen, before she married James White, were believers in his message and were cast out of the Methodist Church for believing in Miller's message of the 2300 day or year prophecy ending in 1844. And because they rejected the message of the first angel's message, he preached the second angel's message. The second angel's message says, "And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." So let me go back. The first angel's message is, fear God, for the hour of his judgment has come. Or we looked at it on this slide. Okay. Or, excuse me, it starts with unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So he's going into the sanctuary message. But it turns out William Miller ended up rejecting the sanctuary truth. This was partially because who he had around him, and he was so disappointed, so heartbroken that Jesus didn't come, that he rejected this, what God was opening up to the other Adventists, which was Sister Ellen Harmon at that time, later to become Sister Ellen White. So Babylon is fallen. That's talking about the second angel's message, which William Miller taught. And William Miller proclaimed to the Christian world, which was in a Babylon of confusion, that because they had rejected the first angel's message about the judgment, that's Revelation 14:7, then they had fallen. Thus, they could not believe in the third angel's message, which Miller himself was led to reject. Here's what Sister Ellen White says in early writings, page 257 to 256. "My attention was then called to William Miller. I saw leading men watching him, and fearing lest he should receive the third angel's message in the commandments of God. At length, William Miller raised his voice against the light from heaven. He leaned to human wisdom instead of the divine, but being broken with arduous labor in his master's cause and by age, he was not as accountable as those who kept him from the truth. They are responsible. The sin rests upon them." Now, I also read somewhere else that God laid William Miller in the grave to save him.
Yeah, it's on the next page. Sure is. Yeah.
After the rejection by William Miller to the third angel's message, the restoration of the commandments and the Sabbath, the deadly wound on the leopard-like beast would have been healed. Okay, so remember, if we are reviewing the leopard-like beast, we know that the church does not understand that this beast is the world of today, and there's going to be pictures of that progression of what Rome became to become the world of today. That wound is a wound to the papal power, and that separates church from state. That would have been healed had not the Seventh-day Adventists come on the scene. So let me read from here. This is from One Shepherd's Rod, page 217, paragraph 1. It says, was made of the fall of modern Babylon by the preaching of the second angel's message of Revelation 14:8. The wound would have been healed, for Babylon had fallen, and that would have brought about the fulfillment of, and all the world wondered after the beast. But Seventh-day Adventists came on the stage of action, thus keeping the thorn in the wound by being proclaimed the only true Protestants since that time. And, even the Catholics say that we're the only true Protestants. They've said it. So it was now that SDAs had accepted the third angel's message, and that was in One Shepherd's Rod 217, paragraph 1. And we just read in early writings that William Miller and his associates had rejected the third angel. So now only the SDAs were teaching the third angel's message since 1844. And that is called, what is that message called? Who knows?
The three angels' message.
Yes, but what is it, the judgment of, that we've been teaching since 1844?
The investigative judgment of the dead.
The judgment of the dead. That is the Adventist Church's main message. So now only the SDAs were teaching the third angel's message since 1844. And though the third angel's message was rejected by Miller and his associates and a great majority of the Christian world, the Laodiceans accepted this message, which says this, Revelation 14:9-10. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast, that's the leopard-like beast, and his image, that's the scarlet-colored beast, that's in 12 track, page 32, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. And we know that the wrath of God is the 7 last plagues in Revelation 16:1. Content in the parentheses is added. So who is the beast that he's talking about, that if any man worship, they're going to drink the wine of the wrath of God? He's talking about the leopard-like beast with the wound healed and the scarlet-colored beast, which I didn't put in here. The scarlet-colored beast is the Babylonian phase and is yet future. So the context of the third angel's message is what needs to be understood in greater detail. It's because it's talking about the beast of Revelation 13 and the image of Revelation 17. To understand that, they have to understand the loud cry of the third angel. There is a difference. Some may not think so. The third angel's message is one part, but the loud cry of the third angel is another part. We find that the third angel's message includes an additional part, which is very important to understand, and which the Laodiceans rejected in 1888. So I'm going to read about that message in 1888 in Testimonies to Ministers, page 91-92. The Lord, in his great mercy, sent a most precious message to his people through elders Wagner and Jones. This message was to bring more prominently before the world the uplifted Savior, the sacrifice for the sins of the whole world. It presented justification through faith and surety. It invited the people to receive the righteousness of Christ, which is made manifest in obedience to all the commandments of God. And now further down in that paragraph on page 92, the prophet of the Lord says this, referring to the 1888 message. It is the third angel's message, which is to be proclaimed with a loud voice. And we know today is known as the loud cry of the third angel. So instead of saying loud voice, we say loud cry in the Adventist church. We see that that Jones and Wagner was an additional message of truth added to the third angel's message. And it is called the loud cry of the third angel's message. And we find that the loud cry of the third angel's message was sent of God. And being very important, Jesus inspired his prophetess. You can read about her being a prophetess in Selected Messages, Volume 3, page 404, paragraph 3. And so God had to inspire his prophetess to write about its importance as noted below. Let's look at another quote. Early Writings, page 277, paragraph 1 says, "Then I saw another angel, mighty angel, commissioned to descend to the earth, to unite his voice with the third angel." She's speaking of that angel in Revelation 14:9, and give power and force to his message. There we find that to the third angel is added another angel. That is why the third angel is one message and the loud cry of the third angel is an additional message. All of these angels in Revelation are a message, right? In this chapter. To understand more about the third angel, those Laodiceans who do not have that loud cry of the third angel really cannot understand the third angel fully. They're interconnected, right? This angel right here, and this is just a depiction, this is not how it actually look, how an angel, we don't know how the angels look, but he comes down with great light. The Bible describes him with having that great light, and it gives power and force, we know, through Ellen White, to this angel and Brother Adair. So there you see the difference by that one word, swell. Swell means it starts out very low and becomes louder and louder. The third angel's message then has not swelled to a loud cry. It has to have this other message to join with it. And so, yet in spite of its importance, it was rejected by the majority of the people in the Laodicean church, as noted in this quote. The work of this angel comes in at the right time to join in the last great work of the third angel's message as it swells to a loud cry. Now, anybody with common sense should be able to see that there's something going on with that additional angel. But if you think about it, because we don't read the testimonies or the spirit of prophecy in the church, in fact, they have discouraged it. I know this, I've heard it from pastors myself. They don't want us teaching. A pastor told me they don't want us teaching Ellen White anymore from the pulpit. And we're not to teach it. We're to teach straight out the Bible. So they rejected that light, the former light, so that there's no way that they can accept the additional light of the fourth angel. So the Minneapolis rejection shut out the loud cry back in 1888, right? And this is what Ellen White wrote about it. An unwillingness to yield up preconceived opinions and to accept this truth, the loud cry of the third angel's message, lay at the foundation of a large share of the opposition manifested at Minneapolis against the Lord's message through Brethren E.J. Wagner and A.T. Jones. By exciting that opposition, Satan succeeded in shutting away from our people in a great measure the special power of the Holy Spirit that God longed to impart to them. So just think about that. God longs to impart that to us, and we should be longing just as hard that he will give it to us. As a church, we were supposed to be waiting and watching for that additional light, that additional oil. We should be praying as a church that we have this loud cry of this third angel's message. And when we really need to, though we do have it, what we need is to understand it. Let's read another quote. That these men should stand in the sacred place to be as the voice of God to the people, as we once believed the General Conference to be, that is past. And that was written in the General Conference Bulletin, April 3rd, 1901. After the Minneapolis rejection of the loud cry, Ellen White talked extensively about the rebellion of the General Conference and declared it was no longer the voice of God to the Adventist Church. Additionally, we have a statement from the prophet confirming the exchange of the keys to the kingdom. Let's read. The keys of the kingdom, you see, passed along from one generation to another, from the patriarchs to the prophets to the apostles, and on down to our day. For instance, about 70 years ago, the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination declared that the General Conference was no longer heaven's highest authority on earth. We just read that, right? And thus it was that when the time arrived for the additional message, which gives power and force to the third angel's message, found in early writings, page 277, to be proclaimed to the church, it came, the message that is, it came not through the General Conference, but through the laity. This is proof that the keys with which Peter was invested are at work today. Remember, he's explaining that phrase, and unto Peter I give the keys to the kingdom. He's explaining that, why Peter was given the keys to the kingdom. It's something that will continue, that continued, right, even to this time. Plainly then, the keys of the kingdom of heaven are in the hands of those who have the truth for the day. Consequently, just as plain as heaven can make it, the truth stands out that the keys of the kingdom of heaven today have passed from the hands of the General Conference to the hands of the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, as verily as they passed from the Sanhedrin to Peter in the days of Christ's first advent. So it is that truth's decree on earth today is the decree in heaven. That's Timely Greetings, Volume 2, number 29, page 9. And because Jesus does not send unimportant messages, he inspired his prophetess to predict in 1890 the future coming of Elijah the prophet to the Laodicean church, who would bring this loud cry message of the third angel, as we shall see in the quote. God had to inspire somebody else to give us that third angel's message in the loud cry. This clearly proves that the third angel has another part to it, and that the other part had to be brought by Elijah. For if the third angel was actually, a full message of its own, and there was no more to be added, then there be no need for another prophet. So the prediction of another prophet is clear evidence that that message has to come again of the loud cry of the third angel, so we can understand the third angel much better. Here's the statement from Testimonies to Ministers, page 375, paragraph 3. Prophecy must be fulfilled. The Lord says, behold, I send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Somebody, Ellen White says, is to come in the spirit and power of Elijah. And when he appears, men may say, "You are too earnest. You do not interpret the scriptures in the proper way. Let me tell you how to teach your message." So what happens in 1890? God's spirit withdraws, meaning no new major prophetic messages are coming to the church because of that 1888 rejection. In 1890, Ellen White also makes the prediction of the anti-typical Elijah and that's going to announce the great and dreadful day of the Lord. That's the judgment of the living. So much like there was a cessation of the spirit of prophecy in between the Old and New Testament times, this also connects back to Ezekiel's vision, which we studied previously on our YouTube channel on Food for the Flock. Ezekiel fasts for 40 days. Ezekiel fasts for 40 days. One day representing a year. We know that God said that, and for that vision, that one day would represent a year. And we know that Ezekiel's vision had to be for the future, right? We explained that because I believe Israel was already carried away. Ezekiel fasts for 40 days. At the exact time of the 40 years expiration, Brother Adair came with the light of the loud cry and gave it to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But they rejected it again because that cessation of prophecy did not bring them to a reform. They didn't reform. They grew even more hard-hearted. So that time was not of a benefit to them. Ezekiel 4 said Judah, which is the Seventh-day Adventist Church in this vision, will be astonied. Now, I was kind of confused about this word. I was like, what does this word actually mean? Because it's close to astonish, but if you go and you look up the meaning of the word astonied, it says a feeling of being amazed, confounded, or petrified with fear, surprise, or admiration. And isn't that exactly what happened when this message came to the church? The shepherd's rod? Some were petrified with fear, some were surprised and confounded, and some were amazed and felt admiration when accepting the message of the judgment of the living. And that's what this message is. It's about the end time events given in greater detail than we formerly received from the prophet of the Lord, Sister Ellen G. White. I want to read this quote from General Conference Special, page 32. That John was not in any sense of the word fulfilling the mission of the Elijah who is to come before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, but that he, the last prophet to the church of his day, simply came in the spirit and power of Elijah to prepare the way for the Lord's first advent. So it is that the Elijah of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the last prophet to the church of this day, comes in the same spirit and power to prepare the way for the Lord's second advent. And 3, that as Elijah of Christ's first advent was one person, and also as the Elijah of Mount Carmel of old was one person, and not a multitude of priests, then by parity of reasoning, the Elijah of today must also be one person, not a multitude of ministers. And right there, he's explaining, because that is how the church tries to explain away that very direct and explicit quote from Ellen White that someone's to come after her. So now you see there, that is what makes him different than the others as a prophet. because he is to interpret the scriptures by his message. The prophets before his time were those who in the Bible up to the time of John the Baptist. And then after that was to come the interpretive prophets such as Peter, James, John the Revelator. All of those people were interpretive prophets. And then the long span of the dark age period to the time of the latter days. And there we find Elijah. So this was just something I was playing around with, making a chart, but the crucifixion did happen in 31 AD. That's a typo. But if you look here to the direct word prophets, there's a dividing line at John the Baptist, okay, where the direct word prophets did not have to refer to the scriptures. They received the word of God. They received the word from God, then communicated it to fellow man. They had it came to them by dreams, visions, visitations from angels. But then at the time of John the Baptist, and that's why the Bible says prophesied until John, you notice Jesus and the apostles, they are interpretive. They're interpretive. Prophets, apostles, and of course the Messiah, they are referring to the scriptures in their teaching. Now, it must agree. Their teaching must agree with the previously written scriptures. So they received light on the scriptures, the interpretation, then they communicated it to fellow man, and they got it through dreams, visions, angel visitations, and all that. And so we go to the Christian dispensation, and the very last prophet is going to be Elijah, the prophet, which is Brother Adair. Yeah, I think we did. So we're going to end there. Oh, wait, I might have something else to read, you guys. From the outline. So this is Brother Adair's commentary on that statement in Testimonies to Ministers, page 475. He says, and in view of the fact that this statement is so clear and anybody who understands the English language knows, well, let me pull this up for you guys too. He says, in view of this fact that the statement is so clear and anybody who understands the English language knows when it says somebody is to come, that is future tense. And the statement was written in 1890 and a long time after Sister White began her ministry in 1844. And yet, in spite of it, the General Conference has put in the back of the book, Testimonies to Ministers, there's a statement where they say this was referring to Sister White herself. Now, I'm a teacher, or I was a teacher, and that does not make any sense. Okay, we would never say that was, we would never teach that's what that statement is saying. So, the only kind of people who would believe such a thing as that are those who do not understand the English language very well or who have complete trust in the General Conference. And we have been told they are no longer the voice of God. So it is important that we believe that somebody is to come with a message of truth to help us to understand the two things that we are talking about. Number one, the judgment of the living, and number two, the gathering of the great multitude. And really, if you look at that, that is simply the message of the final harvest. I'm reading in Answer Book number 1, page 82, paragraph 3. The message swells to a loud cry by virtue of an addition, which gives it power and force. The only conclusion admissible, therefore, is that since the church has never accepted an additional message, and since there has never come one other than the Shepherd's Rod publications that would give power and force to the old message, the third angel's message, the loud cry could not have begun at any time previous to this. That's Answer Volume 1, 82, Paragraph 3. The loud cry has begun since 1844. Though the third angel has begun, the loud cry itself has not begun, though the teaching of it in the Shepherd's Rod publications we read are here. That has begun since 1929. That is what we are learning now about this teaching of the loud cry of the third angel. And this is what Elijah said about the 1888 message. He says, "What happened in 1890 to mark the beginning of the 40 years? Just this. The denomination then wholly rejected the loud cry message of the third angel," talked about that was to unfold the truth of righteousness by faith and the righteousness of Christ, the very truth that again began to unfold years later. And that was ended right there. So I hope that makes it clear, like what happened in the church. Why the church is in such a hostile condition, and it's almost like they have been infiltrated with people that are hostile to the truth.